Welcome to the continuing story of Optimus Prime. In the last segment, we discussed the conclusion of the cartoon and the comic book in the United States, marking the end of what would come to be known as Generation 1. But Optimus Prime's journey was far from complete, and it would continue in what would come to be known as the G1 Japanese continuity. I'm Captain Kyle, and welcome to part 3 of the story of Optimus Prime. In the United States, the Headmasters and the Target Masters were introduced in a storyline known as Rebirth, which spanned the 3 episodes of Transformers Season 4. This was the final season of the US Transformers cartoon. However, Japan went in a different direction. They began the first Japanese exclusive Transformers franchise with the Headmasters cartoon. This story entirely ignored Transformers Season 4 from the US and instead went directly from the Return of Optimus Prime. It then introduced the Headmasters as a brand new type of Transformer. For those who are unfamiliar with Headmasters, these are Transformers whose heads would detach and transform. Optimus Prime, or Convoy as he was known in Japan, did receive a new toy during this time. It was part of the Headmasters Junior set, which also included Fortress Maximus and Chrome Dome. Convoy actually transformed in a manner very similar to his original G1 truck mode, with one notable difference. His head came off. This kind of made him into a Headmaster, though the head itself did not transform as the other ones did in the set. And as it was a junior toy, it was also smaller than the original, and had a cardboard trailer. How fun! Now, while there was a toy for Convoy, in the cartoon, he didn't last long. Japanese writers apparently felt he had served his time, and in a battle on Cybertron, he was once again killed. Hot Rod again becomes Rodimus Prime, or Rodimus Convoy, but at least this time, Optimus's death was not blamed on Hot Rod. The story continued without Convoy, though restoring him to life became an ongoing quest. One attempt was chronicled in the cartoon Super God Master Force, where a special body had been prepared for Convoy called a Transtector. It was apparently hoped that they would be able to bring back Convoy and he would be bonded to this new body. However, this Transtector was stolen along with some others, and then they were scattered around Earth. A human known as Jinrai ended up bonding with the body instead and became what is known as a Godmaster. Now, Godmasters are the Japanese equivalent to the US Power Masters, though with a far different storyline. The storyline in Japan was far different from the US comic book story. This is Jinrai, despite the fact he appears to be Power Master Optimus Prime. Jinrai is the little figure, and the body is mindless, being controlled by Jinrai. Jinrai can merge this body with the trailer to form Super Jinrai. There's another figure called God Bomber who can merge with Super Jinrai to form God Jinrai. And just to be clear, in this context, God has nothing to do with religion, but more about power. Now, while this character definitely resembles Optimus Prime, he is not. They even made a junior set of Jinrai with the cab and the trailer, but he could only form Super Jinrai. Years later, he was reissued in Japan, and he was reissued as God Jinrai. They even created a special edition one, Fire Guts God Jinrai, which is supposed to symbolize him using immense power. Hasbro did import the reissue of God Jinrai and released it in the US as a Toys R Us exclusive. However, it was called Apex Armor Power Master Optimus Prime. That's a mouthful. However, during this time, there was a toy reissued based on this mold that was called Convoy. This is Nucleon Quest Super Convoy. As you can see, it's a black version of the character, but it is indeed supposed to be the original Convoy. There is a story that Convoy became a Power Master in 2036 and entered into a black hole to obtain a super energy called Nucleon, and get a new paint job apparently. But this reissue was much later. The Japanese continuity did not actually have Convoy return until the Battlestars manga, where Convoy's original body was retrieved and he was restored to life. However, he was upgraded into Star Convoy. He would join a group of Autobots known as Battlestars to fight against the evil Decepticon Emperor and his minions. Now, this is the toy version of Star Convoy, and it even comes with a Micromaster version of Hot Rod. Maybe Optimus still holds a grudge about his death in the movie, so he can kick around little Hot Rod as punishment? Who knows? While the Japanese cartoon continuity concluded, the US G1 comic books also came to an end. Though years later, the US comic would continue with a special run of 20 more comics produced by IDW. But it would be decades before that happened. But Hasbro wasn't done with the Transformers. They decided to restart the line with Transformers Generation 2 in 1993. Now, initially, many of the original G2 Transformer toys were repaints and retools of the original G1 toys. The Generation 2 Optimus Prime was very similar to his G1 Series 1 truck version, though he was given a black trailer with the name Optimus Prime on it. I guess the robots in disguise part no longer applied. He also had some extra weapons and a sound box. That didn't sound like Peter Cullen. It also has laser blasts and when the engine's idling, exciting. Generation 2 did not have a cartoon, though they did re-release the original G1 cartoon with special new Space Cube bumpers, featuring characters in their G2 configurations. But there was a new G2 comic book written by Simon Furman, who had previously written a lot of the UK Transformers exclusive comics and took over the US comic after Bob Budiansky left the series. As you might imagine, Optimus was at the forefront of the storylines. The story was darker in tone than the previous series, and Optimus faced new threats in the form of new Cybertronians and a swarm that devoured all beings made of metal. Optimus ends up sacrificing himself again to defeat the swarm, but infects the swarm with a conscience and values.
I think in the end he gets consumed by the swarm, but that's more or less an immediate thing that he kind of thinks that will be the solution to the problem, and he is pretty much recreated straight away. But he did have a habit of dying. I think in almost every media he died a few times, so and then came back.
I guess once you get resurrected so many times, you figure out how to do it quicker. The comic ended after 12 issues, but Hasbro continued to produce toys for the Generation 2 line, including several new Optimus Primes. Hero Optimus Prime was released in 1994, included a brand new mold, plus missiles that could be launched using an air bellows. This toy is virtually identical to Sure Shot, a European release Transformer. The only difference is that Sure Shot did not have the name Optimus Prime on the chest stickers. This new version of Optimus Prime is also very posable. Laser Optimus Prime was released in 1995 and featured a fuel tank style trailer and a brand new cab style. This Optimus is also more posable than any of the previously released versions of Optimus Prime. His sword can light up while in his hand by pressing a button on his back, and his trailer becomes a battle station. This version of the Optimus Prime toy won fan awards twice as the most popular Transformer toy ever. He was also reissued in 2006 with some minor mold changes. And lastly, when Hasbro acquired Tonka, and thus the rights to Gobots, they released a line of Hot Wheels style cars that transformed into robots called Transformers Gobots. The line consisted of new characters and existing ones. Optimus Prime received the Gobot treatment, becoming a Lamborghini Diablo. This would be the first transforming version of Optimus Prime that did not become a truck, but it would not be the last. Japan also released this toy as part of their G2 line, oddly though giving him the name of Optimus Prime instead of Convoy, and a slightly different hood paint job. There were some other versions of Optimus Prime planned for Generation 2, but they were ultimately scrapped. Combat Hero Optimus Prime was to be a recolor of Hero Optimus, and this color scheme did inspire toys that were released in later lines. An auto roller version of Optimus Prime was to be released with the name General Optimus Prime, but was ultimately cancelled. Unfortunately, due to falling toy sales, Generation 2 ended. However, the Transformers line would continue. Hasbro had acquired the toy company Kenner and decided to see what their new acquisition could do with the flagging toy line. And Kenner revitalized the line entirely by changing the format, so instead of changing into cars and planes, they changed into animals and insects and dinosaurs. While there had been Transformers that changed into mechanized versions of animals and dinosaurs and other creatures, this was the first time that all the Transformers would transform into some kind of creature. And they were supposed to be an accurate interpretation of these beasts, not a mechanical version. It was called Beast Wars. Now, the Beast Wars TV series did have an Optimus in it, full name Optimus Primal, but it was clear that this was not the same character of Optimus Prime. The toys, which were released prior to the airing of Beast Wars, told a different story initially. They indicated that Optimus Primal was indeed the original Optimus Prime, and the story was continuing from the previous toy line. However, once the show aired, the toys adjusted their character bios accordingly. And this Optimus Prime as monkey, not truck, continuity kind of faded into oblivion. So Optimus Prime did not actually get a toy in this line. However, during the Beast Wars era, there were two notable events with Optimus Prime. The first was the very small series of Transformers released as KB exclusives called Machine Wars. It is often speculated that this line came about because a Kenner representative revealed plans for a return to G1 at BotCon 1996. This was during a time when Beast Wars was rising in popularity. If there were any such plans, they were obviously scrapped. But in 1997, 12 Transformers were released that were back to the robot-to-vehicle format. Hasbro kept the promise of this rep, but I'm not sure that they kept the rep as an employee. Optimus Prime was one of these toys, but he didn't look all that similar to previous versions. The Machine Wars Optimus Prime was based off of a European exclusive that was released towards the end of the G1 line. It was the TurboMaster Thunderclash. The trailer was retooled to come into line with US toy standards of that day, and the color scheme was adjusted to be much more like Optimus Prime. Though of course you can tell by looking at Machine Wars Optimus Prime that the standard head of Optimus is not present. And while there wasn't really a storyline to go with these figures, it was a great addition to the toy line. The second event of note was the revelation that the Beast Wars TV show, which was CGI generated and definitely groundbreaking at the time, was set on Earth of the past and not an alien world, as was implied in early episodes. The Maximals, who are descendants of the Autobots, found the Ark, which was the great spaceship that crash landed on Earth 4 million years ago at the beginning of G1. They had to protect the Ark from the evil Predacons, who were descendants of the Decepticons. The Predacons, under a new Megatron, planned to change history and therefore the ending of the Great War, which the Decepticons had lost. It was science fiction at its best, and it did feature Optimus Prime, though he was locked in stasis. The Beast Wars did change the landscape of the Transformers toy line forever, but many of the beloved characters from Generation 1 were no longer featured. But the tides would change, and Optimus Prime would again reappear in the toy line, the fandom, and a cartoon once again. And that's a story we will explore in our next episode. Thank you for continuing with me on this journey that explores the story of Optimus Prime. This is Captain Kyle, signing off. See you next time.
Hi, this is Gary Chalk of Optimus Prime. Please stay tuned to Fandom Spotlight. You can watch it online at any time.